Ticket, please."
"Ticket?"
her esteemed colleague repeated absently. He was peering up 3 blocks to the mass of blue and red flashing lights and dark uniformed police officers. His eyes were narrowed intently, and his fingers drummed rhythmically against the wheel as if he was lost in great thought. Maggie risked a look over his shoulder at the parking lot attendant. Because of the considerable height of the truck, she gazed down at him. He appeared amazingly small next to Attila the Hun's broad shoulder, and his face was covered with pimples, probably barely a day older than 18, and his width hadn't caught up with his height. Not exactly Superman material. She sent him desperate thought waves anyway. Hey, you, look at me. Just look underneath Godzilla's arm and spot me for one moment."
"Your parking ticket, sir."
The young man's voice cracked with impatience. He stared at them both glumly as if to say, "I spent 4 years in high school and all I got was a lousy parking attendant job."
"Parking ticket?"
her captor repeated, focusing on the attendant for the first time. He gazed around the cab, then straight at her.
"Do you see a parking ticket?"
"No," she whispered. She looked up the street. She could see blinking lights and the blue-clad police officers scurrying around like ants. She counted 8 of them. 8 cops. So close. Honk the horn, Maggie. Hit him in the ribs. Do something bold and courageous. This man is planning to commit another murder. But she couldn't move. She'd never liked loud noises. She lived in fear of making a scene. She still vividly remembered her mother throwing Waterford crystal across the parlor and screaming at her father that he was nothing but a philandering rat. And she remembered the very late nights when the house was finally dark and quiet, sometimes not until 4 a.m., when she would creep downstairs just to sit in the parlor and listen to the silence. Once, she'd found her father there, sitting in the dark, still and brooding. Then he'd finally reached over and picked up the phone, speaking in a hushed, murmuring voice. She'd remained in the hallway, curled up on the Persian runner, listening to his deep, velvety baritone wash over her like a soothing wave. She had loved him so much, and then he was just gone. Off to visit one of his other families where Maggie was sure the mother didn't scream or throw crystal across the room. Then he was more than gone. His plane crashed, and all Maggie had left was the locket he'd once given her and memories of a midnight phone conversation she'd never told anyone about. That secret was the only piece of her father, the infamous Maximilian the Chameleon, that was solely hers. Abruptly, her captor leaned over, violating her small space and interrupting her thoughts. His lips halted right next to the corner of her mouth, the way a lover's might, while his keen eyes fired to life. Maggie's whole body went rigid. She stopped breathing and curled up inside of herself, while the masculine scent of soap and sweat washed over her cheeks and flared her nostrils. "What?" she asked unsteadily, unable to breathe, unable to move. Should a felon's eyes be so green? And so intelligent, steady, composed? She thought murderers had beady eyes, black beady eyes that were always darting to and fro. That way you knew they were trouble. He said, $10. Huh?
"The attendant claims we have to pay $10, he repeated.
He leaned back, his fingers drumming against the wheel as his gaze returned to the police lights blinking up the street.
"Expensive,"
he murmured absently. She could only stare at him, then belatedly at the purse beside her. The car behind them impatiently honked its horn. Attila the Hun's attention pivoted back to her immediately.
"Come on, Maggie,"
he said tersely, his voice so low only she could hear it.
"No games now. There are a lot of people who could get hurt."
"I know," she whispered. "I know." Frustration and humiliation thickened her throat, but she still couldn't think of anything to do. If she tried to raise a fuss,